Yes, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. It is indeed with Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. We witness that none deserves worship except Allah, and we witness that Muhammad is Allah's servant and his messenger. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be with you in Charlotte, North Carolina, 2 times in the same year, to enjoy your wonderful community here. And if I had to pick, there's 2 places that have impressed me significantly if I had to pick somewhere to live other than Texas. You know, I was born and raised in Texas, the Lone Star State. And I know Texas very well. It's the biggest state in America, and everything is done big in Texas. So I like Texas, so I'm not looking to leave right now, but if I was going to leave, it would be Charlotte, North Carolina, or Minneapolis, Minnesota. Both of those cities I've had wonderful experiences in, and I have very close friends and associates in both of those cities. The lectures that went before me were both very thought-provoking, and I still have some questions that I wanted to ask Sister Khan. We ran out of time, you know, just to hear her expound upon economic thoughts and concepts. It was very, very, very thought-provoking. So I have all these questions. I'm wondering, is this why they're trying to ease the traffic back and forth across the borders, and why they're building the transcontinental corridor that will go from Canada all the way through Texas? So there are a whole lot of questions after that. Is that why they're trying to make it easier for migrant workers to come up from Mexico so we can get cheaper labor? I mean, these are all issues you face in Texas, because you can throw a rock from Texas and hit Mexico. And where I grew up in El Paso, Texas, you could walk over to Mexico. So I found that very thought-provoking. As always, it was wonderful to hear Imam Yahya Abdullah. And growing up and studying in the religion, there were a few imams after Imam Wazir Ali Muhammad that influenced me significantly. And one of them was Imam Yahya. Knowledge-wise, but also just in presentation. And one thing that I learned from Imam Yahya was the smile. Those of you who knew me when I was younger, I didn't smile. I was stone-faced, you know. But I remember watching Imam Yahya, and he had such a beautiful smile. So I need to incorporate that, because it makes the audience feel better. And again, I was looking at Imam Yahya's quote. See, in my presentation, if you see on the bottom, I adapted this from a professional presentation called Fit and Well, Core Concepts in Labs and Physical Fitness and Wellness, Chapter 1. It's published 2005, McGraw-Hill. So I adapted this presentation. I took the backbone that they had, and I added Quran and other things like that. The only part that I was working on last night, but I got real sleepy, so I couldn't finish, was adding Imam Muhammad's commentary. But then I get here, and Yahya's already done the job for me. Imam Yahya Abdullah, he's already done the job for me, so I'm like, alhamdulillah, this is how it works. How many of y'all remember the book Growth for a Model Muslim Community in America, written by Imam Wazir Ali Muhammad? In that book, it was in the 90s. It was a real thin book. If you get a chance, get it and read it. Yeah, it was elongated. In that book, Imam Muhammad said that the educated professionals in our community have to be looking forward for the future of our community. And he particularly mentioned sociologists, psychologists, and other things like that. So it's with that spirit that I wrote this particular presentation. I was at a Ramadan session at the Homewood Hotel, 2006, maybe 2005, and there was a all-you-can-eat restaurant right across the street. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah. I was sitting in the restaurant one night just observing people. And if you get a chance, do that. Not in a condescending way, not not in a way of arrogance, but just to observe human behavior. And you can learn a lot just by sitting there and watching people. And I remember something hit me because it was right after Ramadan, and there was a brother who was at the buffet, you know, and he was a little bit overweight, and he had a bunch of desserts on his plate. And he was eating the dessert before he even got back to his chair. Yeah. And I said, we have come a long way from how to eat to live. We've come a long way from how to eat to live. And even the value of fitness. And I know the world has changed a lot. You know, I know that we're all busy now. We all have professions and jobs and other things like that. But we should never forget just our good common sense. You know, and and because things are more free now, we shouldn't forget to discipline ourselves. You know, it's in freedom where you recognize the most individual advancement and the most self-development. It's in freedom where you realize that and you live that. So let's not forget that, and hopefully there's some things that we can share today that will help with that goal. In all my years of studying the Quran, life example, Muhammad the Prophet, nutrition, the world, there's one thing that I learned that is probably the most profound, and that is, at the end of the day, Tawheed is the principle of creation. Every element. How many of you took chemistry in here? If you take chemistry, raise your hand. In chemistry, you have something called the periodic table of elements. Remember the periodic table of elements? And on the last row of the periodic table of elements, you have what's called the noble gases. Okay? When you study the periodic table of elements, each of those elements, when you break their atoms down, they're all made of the same thing. Protons, neutrons, electrons. Then you can get into subatomic, you can get the quarks and leptons, but that's not necessary. If we just look at protons, neutrons, and electrons, the only difference between iron, just think about iron, and calcium is the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons. That's the only difference. The only difference between oxygen and zinc is the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons. The basic elements that are the building blocks of material creation are all the same. And this shows us the oneness of Allah's creation. For if I was to go to Jupiter today and get Jupiter rock and I broke it down, the rock on Jupiter would be made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Right? Using that as a premise, as a background for our conversation, as we get into our discussion of the most valuable thing that you have that was given to you as a gift, that most of us don't start to value until we get older. Now, when I first started working in preaching, I was only around 18 and I couldn't say that. But I had a few gray hairs now. Yeah, look at my beard, there's a few. So I'm older than I used to be. And I can't do the things that I did when I was 18. When I was 18, I played outside linebacker. I was 185, trim, probably 7% body fat, and I put a hurting on some people. You come around the right side, I'm gonna get you. But now the running back that I would have laid out 18 years ago, look, he hit me now, I'm going to have to get some Bengay. I have to go see a chiropractor. And I'm just in my mid-30s. And I recognize the change in the abilities of my body in just 18 years. And that's taking care of it the best that I can. That's not, I didn't let everything go and just start doing anything. I can imagine what it will be like when I'm 60 or when I'm 70.
All right, then.
Or when I'm 80.
60.
Or when I'm 90. But if we can do some things now, no matter where we are at in our lives, we make the future a little bit easier. Health is the most valuable thing that we have in our lives. I'm not trying to disrespect what the prophet said. He did say reason was the most useful thing. But if you don't have a healthy mind, you're not going to be able to reason. If you don't have a healthy body, okay, although reason is the most useful thing for you, the healthier you are, the more beneficial your reasoning will be. Okay, because then you can use that reasoning to help bring about a better situation in the world. If I was to go ask an 18-year-old, how valuable is your health? He might say, man, I ain't worried about that. All I'm worried about right now. Not realizing that every decision you make in your life impacts your health, period. Everyone. And to the young people, right now, I know you think you're Superman. I used to think the same way. You can eat whatever you want. When I was a senior in high school, I went to Pizza Inn and I ate 28 slices of pizza in one lunch. I went that afternoon, went to football practice, ran it all off. Didn't gain an inch, didn't gain an ounce. My metabolism was popping. I thought I could eat anything. Chocolate chip, my metabolism was raging. I shouldn't have been eating all that stuff. I should have been eating right. But my perception was skewed. If I go eat 28 slices of pizza now, indigestion, heartburn, headache, I'm going to get an ulcer. So to the young people, I know you don't realize it yet, but it's important to make good lifestyle choices now so that your body will serve you better as you move along. So our topic for today is the Quran and wellness, fitness, and lifestyle management. What time do I need to be finished? It is 2:15. I respect time. I just need to know how fast or slow I need to go with this. So tell me, it's 2:15. What time do I need to be done? 7:15. Okay, excellent. Great. Okay, so let's turn to the next slide. This is in your Quran in chapter 55, verse 7 through 9. You know, and remember, Yahya was talking about this chapter earlier on the second page, on page 2. The chapter in Quran called Ar-Rahman. And that chapter reminds us of all the wonderful resources that Allah made for human beings to benefit from. The oceans filled with so many useful and beautiful things. The land He has given us, life abundant, and so many wonderful, beautiful things. Okay? So also your human body is a wonderful resource that Allah has created and given to you. He didn't charge you anything for it. Okay? You got it as a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when you got it, it was working well for the most part. Some people were born with inborn birth defects and everything like that, but for the most part it was working well. And if you look at Ar-Rahman, this chapter right here, and He enforced the balance that you exceed not the bounds, but observe the balance strictly, and fall not short thereof. And the word that's used for balance is mizan. Mizan. And in everything in life, you need a balance. You need a balance. And as we go through our workshop today, we're going to see that for wellness and health, balance is extremely important. So this is a concept. If you need this underlying balance or whatever, do it, because this is a concept for the rest of this workshop. The idea of balance and the importance of keeping a balance for health and wellness. Next slide. And then the next slide. Okay. Is that it? All right. In chapter 4 and 79, I could go over all the Arabic terms and stuff like that, but in order for us to get through the workshop, I'm going to refrain on that. I'm just going to kind of give you a cursory review of the verses. Whatever good happens to you is from Allah, but whatever evil happens to you is from your own self. And this to the prophet. We have sent thee as a messenger to mankind, and enough is Allah for a witness. Okay? So now, part of what we can garner from this particular verse is that here you have life, you have a good body, you have a healthy body, you have health that God, Allah has given you. And now what you do with your own hand is going to have a major impact on your health. Often good results health-wise comes from what you do yourself, and bad results health-wise come from what you do yourself. Okay? So a lot of our results, our end results, either positive or negative, depends on the choices and lifestyle choices that you and I make and that we stick to. Next slide, and then the next slide. Prophet Muhammad, he mounted the pulpit one day and he cried. Remember what Imam Yahya was saying about the prophet earlier, his human side and his human sensitivities. We're oriented in this world that men ain't supposed to cry. Right? Now, if you live in a certain part of town and you know crying is going to get you harassed and bullied, I'm not encouraging you to walk around crying. You have to know your atmosphere and your environment. Okay? But you can never forget that you're a human being. And you can never forget human sensitivities. Having 4 daughters, I have 4 daughters, and they have reminded me of being sensitive. And one time my wife left town for a week. This was back before I had 6. I only had 5 at the time. And to this day, I'm the only one that has ever had all the kids all by myself for a week. She's never had them all by herself for a week. But I remember when she left me with the kids, she had a funeral to go to. It was in January. And her grandmother had passed away, and her grandmother lived in Elmira, New York, upstate New York. And I didn't want to drive my kids from Houston to New York in the middle of the winter because I had no idea what the roads would be like and other things like that. And I'm from Texas. It snows in Houston. When it snows in Houston, it's a major event. It is a major event. Everybody takes pictures because it hardly ever snows there. And I don't know how to drive on the snow. The last thing I need to be is in some mountain on my way to New York in a snow blizzard and not knowing how to drive with my 5 children at that time, so I decided not to go. So she left me with the children, and that week, having to be mother and father, boy, it softened me up. It did. It softened me up. It helped me become a more tender person. It helped me become a more caring person. You know, and I never forget one of my daughters, her tooth was about to fall out. You know, and she came to me, and she was like so scared, and she was so nervous. But really, it was just barely sitting. You know how just a little tiny piece of, you know, so I reached in and I took it out. And she said, "That's it!" And she gave me this big hug. Oh, I love you, Daddy. And that will sensitize you. So, you know, I have two sons now, but I didn't understand why, in the beginning, I didn't understand why God was this daughter after daughter after daughter after daughter. But I understand now. I understand now. So the prophet, he mounted the, plus if you have two daughters and you raise them and educate them, you get paradise, right? So I got twice the opportunity, right? So here the prophet, he mounted the pulpit and he cried and he said, ask Allah for forgiveness and health. Ask Allah for forgiveness and health, for after being granted certainty. In other words, after you being granted is yaqeen, that certainty of faith. Okay? For after being granted certainty, one is given nothing better than health. Okay? And this is related in one of the traditions called Tirmidhi. Next slide. Again, the prophet on health. He said, no one will be allowed to move from his position on the day of judgment until he has been asked how he spent his life. One. How he used his knowledge. Two. How he earned and spent his money. We got to do a bunch of things, don't we, right? And in what pursuits he used his health. So here you see the prophet placing great emphasis on health. And when we read the words of our dear Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you're not reading the words of an ordinary Joe. You're reading the words of a social psychologist. You're reading the words of a sociologist. You're reading the world of a builder of nations, a builder of individuals, a founder of a great faith tradition. His words are very profound and very, very, very impactful. So just think about it. How are you using your wealth? Are you using it on Whoppers and Big Macs? Are you using it on ice cream shakes and sundaes? In what pursuits are you using your health? Okay, chocolate chip cookies, Zuzus and Woo-Woos and Ding Dongs. Now remember conditioning, right? The man spoke about conditioning. Sometimes you can get so conditioned that your natural appetites become retarded. I mean people who can drink Kool-Aid but can't drink water. I don't like the way water tastes. But if I put some red flavoring in it and some sugar, look, by the time I'm finished with sugar today, I hope you enjoyed the fry yesterday. Sugar. If you want to, you can leave now, because this is one of those moments that if you stay, it's going to change your perception. It's going to hurt. And I'm not saying that I don't enjoy sugar. Sensibly, every once in a while. But sugar, the way that we have it now, was never meant for human consumption. What do you mean by that? Processed, refined sugar has only been in the human diet for around 100 years now. Before that, you had sweet things. You had honey. You had molasses. You had sugar and fruit and sugar and vegetables. But you didn't have processed, refined sugar. Now, biologically, carbohydrates in and of themselves are not bad. They're necessary. I did a lecture in Florida at a college called Eating and Academic Performance. And when I was doing my research, I learned that your brain needs around 75 grams of carbohydrate just to function. Okay? So your body has an appetite for carbohydrates, a natural appetite. Okay? If I can learn how to trick your natural appetite, I can drive you to consume, and I can make money off of you. So since we have an appetite for carbohydrates, I just get some product, I put a bunch of carbohydrates in it, called simple refined sugar, and I push it, and I sell it. So now you go to the store now, and you have an aisle full of candy. All processed, all refined, all with artificial colors, all with artificial flavors. Now, do a compare and contrast, and my whole lecture is not going to be on just nutrition. I want you to do a compare and contrast. I want you to think about a strawberry. Is a strawberry colorful? Very pretty. Brothers, let me tell you something. You get you a strawberry, and you get you a what's called a garnishing knife. Okay, and you cut the strawberry in strips. You don't cut it all the way. You leave a little bit at the edge, and you cut like 5 strips. Then you fan it, and it looks like 5 hearts. You sit that on a plate with a fruit salad and another several delicious breakfast items, and you get a tray and you take it to your wife. You serve her breakfast in bed, and you say, "You see this strawberry? It represents my love for you." And every strip is a magnification of how much love is in my heart for you. Now you know how they say the way to a man's heart is food? Nah, that's the way to a sister's heart, brother. When you want to get your wife's heart, cook for her. Okay. Take care of her. Do special things. I garnish my wife's plate. I get an orange. You see, you get you a paring knife. See, you didn't know y'all get cooking lessons, did you? So you get your garnishing knife, and you get your orange, and you just cut it like this, like teeth, all the way around. Then when you finish, you get it and you just open it up like that. And then what you're going to do, you have something that looks like a flower. Then you get you a fresh cherry, you cut it in half, and you put the cherry right in the middle of the orange. And you can give her a different kind of bouquet. Okay. Or you can give her a fruit bouquet. That's healthy for her, right? And nutritious. Strawberry, but back to the actual lecture. That was just some side notes. Strawberry. So you think about it, is a strawberry sweet? Yeah. Yeah. It's full of fiber. Remember I mentioned 29 slices of pizza? And one of the sisters said, "Yeah, you have a lot of constipation." Well, the seeds on a strawberry are fiber. And fiber, your body cannot digest it. It can't digest it. So that's why it makes you regular, right? So then you're going to get fiber, you're going to get sugar, carbohydrates, you can get vitamin C, right? All that from a strawberry. If I eat a half cup of strawberries, or even if I eat a cup of strawberries, if I eat a cup of strawberries, I'm going to get maybe 120 calories, maybe. A whole bunch of fiber, a whole bunch of vitamin C. I eat 2 Oreo cookies, I get sugar and fat. Now go pick up the nutrition label for Oreo cookie. Vitamin C, none. Vitamin A, none. Saturated fat, 90%. Sugar, 36 grams. So cut back on the sugar. Cut back on the sugar. It was never really meant to be consumed the way we're consuming it. And it's actually very, very, very bad for us. So, but enjoy your desserts sensibly. Next slide. They say wellness is a new health goal, but it's really not. Because people with a broader perception of life have always viewed the human being as a complete person. Y'all remember when the concept of holistic health was introduced? Look, Imam Elijah Muhammad was telling you about holistic health years before that. Years before that. Viewing the human being as a whole, complete individual. Okay? So, out of the holistic health concept comes wellness. Wellness. And they say the new health goal, but it's really not. Wellness is optimal health and vitality. And what are the dimensions of wellness? One, physical wellness. If you're well physically. Second, emotional wellness. We still have to work on this one. Honestly. You have people who go and kill themselves because they lost a job. Right? They go commit suicide. What kind of effects does 400 years of chattel slavery have on the emotional wellness of a whole group of people? See, part of what the Nation of Islam did from a historical perspective is it helped make your perception of yourself better. Helped change the perception of self. Very powerful social psychologist, Imam Elijah Muhammad was. It made your perception, it improved your perception of yourself and helped bring about emotional balance. Now I know it had the potential to go to some other extremes, but it's important that you feel good about yourself and you have emotional wellness. One of the biggest epidemics we're facing in America right now is depression. Depression. And when I was working on my master's degree, I did one of my final projects. I looked at how depression actually affects the body. And your psychological depression actually affects the metabolism of your body and will make you gain weight. Chemically. And then the weight chemically contributes back to the depression. So it's a vicious, it's a very vicious, it kind of reinforces itself. And these are things that we're barely getting into, because we used to only think it went one way. We used to think, well, you get depressed, you eat more, and then you gain weight. But no, it's actually something that's happening deeper than just a basic look at you eat more. It's something that's happening to the actual metabolism of the person. So keeping a positive mental attitude. You know, they said whenever you would be around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what Imam Muhammad did, he helped us see the Prophet as a human being. And he helped us always keep the human side of the Prophet alive in us. Okay, not just trying to make the Prophet mechanical and do this and roll this leg up and do this and do that and do this so you look like a costume character. As compared to understanding the things that made the prophet's personality what it was. And when you read about Muhammad the prophet, may God send prayers and peace upon him, you're told that you would not come in his company. Whenever you came in his company, you would feel better. He would make you feel better. He would uplift your spirits. No doom and gloom. No cycle of depression. After the battle of Uhud, when all the Muslim believers were killed, the Muslims came back and they had a higher spirit and they worked harder, and it just blew people away. They said, you lose a battle and you work harder? Okay, because they did not, the faith they had in Allah and their resolve that they did what they could do and the rest was up to Allah, that was actually preventative. It was psychologically prevention for depression. The paradigm and the way they looked at the world. Now, if we, you could get into, and if you want to write this down, in psychology, there's something called internal locus of control and external locus of control, or perceived locus of control. I won't go into it today because that will kind of take us in a different direction, but just think about that. Emotional wellness, in there, psychological wellness, then intellectual wellness. Imam Muhammad said, if your worship is right, your what? Thinking will be right. If your worship is right, your thinking will be right. Imam Muhammad will tell us, practice thinking right. To practice thinking right. Okay? So physical wellness, emotional wellness, intellectual wellness, spiritual wellness, interpersonal and social wellness. How many times you met that one brother or sister who just don't get along with anybody? Now, it's natural for you to have friction. It's natural for some people not to get along. But you shouldn't not be able to get along with anybody. You have conflicts with everybody? Okay. Well, then there's some interpersonal illnesses going on. There is a lack of an ability to relate to other human beings, a lack of ability to empathize with other human beings, a lack of the ability to see the world through another's eyes. Okay? So having interpersonal and social wellness is another problem. Have you ever heard of a saying called sociopathic? Mm-hmm. You know, there was a psychologist, he was commenting on Eminem. How many of y'all know who Eminem is in here? Slim Shady. And he was commenting on the graphic nature of his lyrics. How many of y'all heard of Howard Stern? Well, they call him a shock jock, right? Well, when you listen to this Eminem character's lyrics, it's like shock therapy, right? So the psychologist very aptly and very appropriately labeled him a sociopath. Said it was sociopathic, okay? Because the kind of lyrics and the ideas that he was presenting did not lead to social wellness. Okay. I remember the man was talking about 50 cent. How many of y'all heard of 50 cent? Half of a dollar, right? Isn't that what the man said? It's half of a dollar. But then he said, how are you going to put out a movie called Get Rich or Die Trying? Isn't that sociopath? Isn't that pathological? Isn't just the title pathological? Get rich or die trying. When I first started working with Imam Qasim, I ran a program called RAPCO for him: responsibility, accountability, productivity for cultivating your opportunity. If y'all know Imam Qasim, that's an Imam Qasim title. But at that time we were analyzing the psychological effects of rap music. But this was way back in the 90s when it was still, compared to today, it actually made some sense. This stuff nowadays, and I hate to admit it, but some of it's coming out of Houston. They have some music called Screw in Houston. Yeah. They called it Screwed Up and Chopped Up. Now, what's wrong with you that you even listen to music that's screwed up? There was a whole DJ out there, and I know some guys in this crew. Some of them became Muslim. There was a DJ called DJ Screw. And he actually died. He died from an overdose on syrup. How many of y'all know what syrup is? Sipping on some syrup. Okay, if your child comes home talking about, Mom, I had some syrup, and he ain't talking about pancakes. Okay, well, what they do is they get codeine and they mix it with a sweet drink. Okay, and that's why if you go to Walgreens, you can't buy cough syrup like you used to be able to buy it just on the shelf. Okay, and then there's crystal meth and some other things that can be made from certain drugs. But they would mix it with a real sweet soda, and they would drink it. Well, eventually DJ Screw, he overdosed and died because he was drinking too much of this syrup stuff. But they say the way he got the idea to slow the music down is that he was smoking weed. And it was just too fast for him to understand it. This is the urban legend. Y'all know what urban legend is? This is the urban legend. And so that he just slowed it down so that he could hear it. I mean, but see, the bad thing is it produces an effect on the people, on the young people down there. So when they talk, they do not talk with a normal pitch. Hey there. Like, man, look, I just want to make you a chipmunk just so you can sound regular. So we won't even get into the psychological effects of the music today. But then environmental or planetary wellness. I actually moved from a side of town I lived on because of the environmental toxins. The environmental toxins in Houston. There is an area in Houston that when you look at the incidence of cancer, you have a pocket of cancer right along a certain side of town. I mean, and so what, you know, if you know academics, and I know many of you have advanced bachelor's degrees and advanced degrees, you know, academics is slow sometimes. You know, it takes a long time to prove something by way of the peer-reviewed literature. Well, I have common sense. If a certain area, a whole bunch of people have cancer, well, something's wrong. I don't need 15 years of period. I'll be dead by then. I just gotta go. So I moved way out in the country. Air is fresh out there. I feel like singing that old song, the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Go ahead, next one. Wellness is a continuum. Have you heard the term continuum before? It's not a cut and dry situation. It's a continuum. And if you see down here, vital, meaningful life, on the right, on the left, malaise. Do you see on top low-level wellness? And you see all the different kinds of wellness. And you can add and take from this. This is just one model. This is not the end-all, be-all. And really, we haven't had the time to really put the Quran and stuff in this like we need to. You know, but once we really begin applying the Quran and the concepts of the Imam, we're going to evolve all of these things. We just had to go get information first. You know, but and your children will do more, and our grandchildren will do more. They'll impact this society and this educational system in ways we could never fathom. Because when our parents were just trying to get it, they were just trying to learn how to pray. It was rough to raise Muslim. You came out of the nation into Islam and had a bunch of children in a society whose life did not support yours, and you had to raise up children when everything in the society was working against you raising good children. Even the Disney Channel was crazy now. everything. My kids don't go to school. My kids go to homeschool. And it's a mercy, and I can see the difference because my children do not cuss. They don't know how to cuss. And it's so funny to see them when somebody uses a bad word, their eyes get big. He said a bad word. It's refreshing. It's refreshing because you can see what will happen if you put the human being in the right environment. He doesn't have to turn out bad. He doesn't have to turn out evil and sinful and corrupt. He can turn out pure. Now, they're going to have their tests. They're going to have their challenges. But at least we're trying to give them a good solid foundation so when they interact with the world, they're not already oriented in a very unfortunate way. So they don't use cuss words. And so then one of my daughters would listen to one of those Disney songs or something, and she was singing a song and she had a cuss word. And so sisters and brothers, they got, man, you did you. She said, I didn't know that. I didn't know I was using a cuss word. She said, I don't even know what those are. Right? So here you have a continuum. You have a continuum, and in here you have physical, mental, and emotional symptoms, change and growth, and you have a high level of wellness. Well, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he represents for us the optimum model for human wellness. Yes, sir.
Now, when you turn away from the mic, pick it up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. As you can see, I'm not a mic hogger, right? Okay. So good. Okay. Now, Muhammad represents for us the well human being. He represents for us the well-adjusted human being. He represents for us, as Allah says of him in the Quran, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That in Muhammad you have the most excellent example. And you see how Imam Yahya was mentioning earlier, how he was playing with the kids and other things like that. This is emotional wellness. Okay? The same, in a similar situation, a man came to the Prophet and he said, you play, you hug your boys? You hug and kiss the boys? And the Prophet said, he who doesn't get mercy cannot expect mercy. He who doesn't give mercy cannot expect to receive mercy. So Prophet Muhammad represents the well-adjusted individual, but Allah gave us a model in him because if the psychologists of today had to predict his life, they would predict that he would turn out pathological. Why? Why do I say that? Because he lost his father before he was born. So shouldn't the whole African American community be looking at Prophet Muhammad? Remember Imam Yahya said 70% single parent households? So the Prophet loses his father before he's born. And his mother dies when he's 6. And his grandfather dies when he's 8. Right? So at 8 years old, he has already lost 2 primary care providers. Now you go to the average psychologist today, and you tell them that a child is going to be traumatized like that, they'll start listing the potential pathologies of this particular child. Okay? However, in the Prophet, you have someone who does not, although he has these challenges, he does not become affected by the vices in the society. He doesn't pick up drinking as a habit. He doesn't pick up smoking as a habit. And although there may not been weed, they were smoking something back then. Maybe it was opium or something. They were smoking something. They had mind-altering substances at that particular point in time. He was never known to womanize. They would say, well, a person who lost their mother at 6, they may have insecure attachments to women, and they may seek out a number of relationships with females, trying to fulfill this unsatisfied missing link from childhood. But you don't see this in Muhammad the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see actually a person who actually tries. Okay, as he gets older, he recognizes the challenges, and when he marries someone, he marries a widow. He marries a widow. Big sign for us in that from Allah. Big sign for us. Because widows were marginalized in Arab society. Now look at the model for us. Won't that help our community? 70% of women head in households. And those men are dead. They may not be dead biologically, but they're definitely not well and vital. Right. They're down in the down here with malaise, right? And look, it's just amazing to me. We got to write a whole commentary about this. Why you have so many African American males playing Xbox 268.9 with Rockwallers and SUVs? What is this? Why the woman goes out and work, you sit home playing Xbox. Now I don't know how true that is, but it's a powerful image. It's a powerful image, and you watch the movies. I want you to go back and watch Baby Boy. Yeah. Now you're gonna have to. It can make you uncomfortable. Some of it you're gonna have to just turn. You're gonna have to turn it off on a couple of those push past pause on a couple of those instances in the movie. But you saw a model of a pathological lifestyle. A young man who was unproductive, who had just got out of prison, who stayed at home, okay, while his woman went out and worked. And so while she was out at work, he was playing in the field. Right? It's pathological. In the 5th Ward in Houston, Texas, when I first moved to Houston, Texas, 5th Ward, a traditional African American neighborhood, 1 in every 4 women had HIV. 1995. Thank you. All right, next slide. The Quran and wellness. And spend of your substance in the cause of Allah, and make not your own hands contribute to your destruction, but do good, for Allah loveth those who do good. Again, personal responsibility, and I'm going to speed up so we can try to get through this because it's 2:54. Next slide. Next slide. That's just the Arabic. New opportunities, new responsibilities. Now this is extremely important right here. Because when we think of wellness, there's 2 classifications that we need to have in mind. One is infectious diseases. These are diseases caused by invading microorganisms, and they were the leading causes of death a century ago. That means diphtheria, botulism, pneumonia, scarlet fever, measles, mumps, the plague, all those things. Those were infectious diseases. Chronic diseases. Read this one carefully with me. Let not your own hand contribute to your destruction, right? Chronic diseases caused by a variety of lifestyle and other factors are the leading causes of death today. Now that's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So it's no longer, the leading cause of death is no longer I caught a bug and it killed me. The leading cause of death is I made poor lifestyle changes. And the bad habits eventually led to my death. Next slide. I'll skip this. Next slide. Leading causes of death overall. The number 1 leading cause of death in America is heart disease. I'm not going to ask how many of us have heart disease. When I was working in what's called acute clinical nutrition, when I worked in a hospital, every time I looked at a medical chart, all I had to see was the person's age, their gender, and their race, and I could guess if they were diabetic or not. That's all I needed. Anytime I saw a middle-aged African-American female or Latino female who was overweight, it was almost automatic that when I opened up their chart, they were diabetic. Okay, so we got a number of challenges against us. One, hypertension. It's just something about us. Now I know some people say the stress and all that. There's actually a theory, that was actually very thought-provoking. The idea, we can accept it or not, was that in Africa, where most of us came from originally, salt was in scarce. It was scarce. It was scarce. So the body adapted in such a way to retain the salt because it was scarce. But you bring that same body to a place where salt is abundant, it has a negative effect. All right, I'll spend a second on this. So we're African Americans, we have more. Norvasc is the national, is almost an automatic drug if you're African American over 40. I can almost guess you're on Norvasc or Metoprolol or something. Sodium is what is in salt. One form is sodium chloride, but there's other forms of salt. You need 1/2 of a gram. Biologically, you need 1/2 of a gram. And you can get that in a pinch. In a pinch. You need 500 milligrams of sodium a day just for your body to function. If I was to actually calculate your and my sodium, we probably get 10 grams of sodium a day. A day. I ain't gonna talk about the cold cuts we ate at lunch. But think about that. Now I'm gonna give you a clear example of it, of how something in one atmosphere can be positive, but in another atmosphere be negative. How many of you, I'm sure everybody here, you've heard of sickle cell anemia?
Yes.
Well, since most of us came from Africa, in Africa, the sickle cell is protective against malaria. It is, it's protective against malaria. It's actually beneficial for a person in an area where malaria is endemic to have the altered cellular structure because it protects them against malaria. When you bring somebody out of that environment and places them and you place them in another environment, the very thing that was protective for them in their home environment becomes detrimental in the new environment. The case may be the same for salt, but it tastes good, doesn't it? This is, just be honest. That's why you use so much of it. I know people that salt and then taste. Salt and then you taste it. Right? Go back and read How to Eat to Live. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad predicted an epidemic of diabetes in the African American community in the 50s. And how do you remember those cartoons? My father has a book of cartoons from the nation. And the Muslim was always fit and clean and dressed well. And the other guy had a big belly hanging out, all unkept with a big pork bone in his hand. So the images, the self-image that was projected was one of fitness. See, look, I'm looking at this. I wasn't part of it. I was born in 74. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad died in 75. I'm a transition child. I'm a product of the transition. But I look back at the psychology and the image. You go back and look at all those FOI pictures. Now, all I can do is say what I saw in the pictures because I wasn't there. So if there were some overweight brothers in real life, I didn't see them because all I saw was a picture. Everybody on that FOI picture was fit. That's right. Clean, exercise, wellness. And we've lost that work ethic. We think it's sooner to be overweight now. This is sooner or something. It's just interesting to me. Actually, overeating is one of the biggest bid'ahs in the Muslim community. So heart disease, cancer. Do you know high fat intake is a risk factor for cancer? High intake of fat. Okay, I'm going to give you a prescription of colon cancer. You want to get colon cancer?
Yes.
I'm going to tell you exactly how to get it. Eat a whole bunch of steak, refined starch, and eat very few vegetables. Somebody said, that's my diet now, bro. Or make some adjustments. High intake of refined foods, high intake of red meats, and low intake of vegetables, they are major risk factors for developing cancer. Colon cancer and other things. And you know colon cancer is one of the leading causes of death in African Americans? Colon cancer. Stroke, chronic upper respiratory diseases, emphysema, chronic bronchitis, unintentional injuries, and diabetes. These are the leading causes of death. Next slide. Now I want you to notice something here. In the age 15 through 24, that's that young group I was telling you about, right? You think you're going to be healthy forever, nothing can faze you, you can eat whatever you want and it melts off. Well, in 15 through 24, the leading cause of death is unintentional injuries, homicide. If you make that African American, that jumps to first. That jumps to first. Homicide jumps to first. African American males. And I don't remember. I don't know what the statistics are now. Things have changed, but I remember around 10 years ago, you were 40 times more likely to be killed. If you were African American male, you were 40 times more likely to be killed by another African American male than anything else. Okay? Unintentional injuries, homicide, suicide, cancer, heart disease, congenital defect, HIV/AIDS, 15 through 24. Right? Now look what happens now. I don't have 44 through 60, but look what happens 25 through 44. It's still unintentional injuries, but instead of self-inflicted instant kind of result wounds like homicide and suicide, cancer jumps up. That's because you're getting older. And now the cumulative effects of bad habits are starting to take their toll. Okay? When you first start the bad habit, you may not notice the results. But as time goes on, just think about your house, okay? The first day you get a dent in the wall, or you get a scratch in the wall, it's just a scratch in the wall. A few years later, that scratch looks real bad, doesn't it? It's grown, it got dirt around it, so now I need to do something, right? Well, that's what happens over time. So the cumulative effects of our bad habits, they begin to have a toll on our health as we get older. Then heart disease, it jumped up. Suicide, HIV/AIDS, see, it jumped up. Okay? Well, you caught it when you were 18. And you finally died when you were in your 25 to 40. But what is the most interesting thing now about HIV is the whole thing has changed. It's still a leading cause of death, but they have these highly active antiviral medications that are effective in stopping the quick progression of the virus, but it's producing some other major issues. And like there's one, they call it the camel. Now, and I'm not saying this for you to go start looking around with people, man, you got a hump on your neck, you got HIV. No. One of the things is called your fat distributes unevenly. And you have a big pocket of fat here, and then you get a big lump of fat on your neck. Because the medicine, although it is delaying the speed at which the virus kills you, it's creating unwanted side effects. in your body. And now, while you still have a few people who may get HIV or AIDS from blood transfusions, but you don't really hear that anymore. Most of the people who have HIV AIDS today, unless they're children born to HIV parent, got it from poor lifestyle choices. If you're a Muslim and you're getting married, you better get an HIV test before you get married. And you better make sure you can trust that brother or sister, because we have seen horror cases where someone gets married thinking they can trust somebody, and then the person eventually gets sick. Okay? Then homicide, chronic liver disease. Now, chronic liver disease. Obesity. I'm telling you, like, I'm a nutritionist and all this, and so I remember one day I bent over to tie my shoe and I couldn't reach. I said, something got to change. Then I got shocked again because my liver enzymes were elevated. Now, I'm speaking to you as a healthcare professional. And I'm like, I don't drink. Okay? Then I did a whole nother line of research, and I learned of two new conditions. One's called metabolic syndrome, and the other one is non-alcohol induced fatty liver disease. Now, obesity is causing fatty liver disease. Okay? I lost some weight, my enzymes came down. You know, I dropped around 10, 15 pounds. Now, my metabolism is so keen that when I eat right, when I eat fruits and vegetables, I drop weight like it was never on me. But as soon as my weaknesses get to me, quesadillas, enchiladas, and chocolate chip cookies, as soon as I start eating that stuff again, my gut comes back. It's that sensitive. As soon as I start eating my vegetables, it will drop again. Okay? Next slide. Now this is the leading actual causes of death. This is the activities that bring about the illnesses that cause death. Does that make sense? So this is what you're doing. So Frankenfat is Frankenstein's monster. Okay? So the case may be 20 years from now, we find out that when we genetically altered a vegetable or a fruit or whatever, the way it interacted with the human body actually created pathologies, because the body couldn't follow its normal pathways because the body wasn't used to dealing with this food in this form. So conceptually, yes, I can see that as a very sound argument, that once you start tinkering with things, you can get bad results. Now there's a line. So Alaikum salam.
Quick observation, and then I have a question. My thinking was that Africans came here as slaves, and because we worked in the field, ate the throwaway of the pig, and worked in the sun from sun up to sundown.
Yes.
That we genetically altered our genes, and that's what caused high blood pressure in us.
Right.
Kind of like sickle cell anemia,
right.
Genetic mutation because of malaria.
Right.
Okay. And the other thing.
Now, hold on. Let me stop you right there. Everybody write this down. Write down epigenetics. Epigenetics. And go home to Google. You know, Google is a verb in the dictionary right now. You can Google it, yes. Go to Google and type in epigenetics, and you will see how the environment and what you eat actually affects your genes and what you pass on to your children. And sometimes, if for a long enough period of time you eat a deficient, something in your environment is deficient or creates some abnormalities, then that can become a genetic predisposition in your children. And epigenetics is that science. Go ahead.
And the other thing is, why is it that, I don't know, maybe we just didn't know about it, so many African American men are coming down with prostate cancer?
I haven't studied prostate cancer enough to give you an intelligent answer, but cancer in general, I can say that diet is linked to cancer in general, and many different kinds of cancer. And just a poor lifestyle itself, probably in one way or another contributes to it. If I get some time, I'll try to do some more studies to try to see what the hypotheses are of why African American men tend to have more prostate cancer than others. I can't answer that right now. What's the next quote?
What about smart balance?
I can't. Omega-3 and omega-6, but especially omega-3 fatty acids, have been shown to be beneficial in heart disease. In the practice of food in general, things are fortified. That means they add something to food that wasn't in there originally. I don't have a problem with fortification if the source of the fortification, like the source of the what they're adding, is a natural source. I think that's not a bad practice itself. So while I can't particularly comment on smart balance from any position of authority, I would say that the omega-3s in smart balance, it would have to be more beneficial than you just getting the plain vegetable oil on the shelf. Who was next? Yes, ma'am. Alaikum salam.
I've been doing just a little bit of research myself. And coconut oil is a saturated fat. Correct?
Yes.
I've been getting different opinions on that. Some doctors say that it is a healthy fat, others say no.
In the field of nutrition, we all respond to things differently. So the saturated fats that are the most problematic are those that come from animals. If you have heart disease, I would advise you to limit your fats in general. And the fats you consume, I would advise you to do olive oil and canola oil. Unless there's something that you have to use coconut oil for. Because some people will use coconut oil and have bad results. And other people may use it and not experience the same results. So if you have heart disease and you start to use the coconut oil, I would just advise you to make sure that you check your blood levels of your cholesterol levels and see how it's having an impact on you individually. Okay, this is the last question.
My question was in relation to different population studies. The Native American or American Indian in the Southwest, they can't really tolerate alcohol. Has a stronger effect on them.
Yes.
Their body physiology versus anyone else that drinks the same amount.
Yes.
Does the sodium intake, is there, I work in research, but I'm not sure if there is research out there that discusses the African American community as it relates to sodium.
Yes.
And how our body process sodium.
Yeah.
And how it can tend to cause a propensity to have a higher, a negative effect upon us.
Absolutely.
Versus just, another person walking down the street, they can take the same amount of sodium. And then with that, should you look at like blood type, your own personal blood type, and try to follow a diet that's closer to
that when you eat raw garlic and you actually bite the garlic, it releases this allium, and this allium lowers cholesterol. Okay?